Hello, everybody. Eve Harrow on Rejuvenation for the Land of Israel Network. This is being taped late in the day on March 6, 2019, just as we're rolling from Adar Aleph, from the first month of Adar to Adar Bet, since winter isn't over, and therefore it's not time for Passover yet, and that's why we need another month of Adar in order to get Nisan, the month where Passover comes out, firmly in the spring, where it belongs, just like the Bible tells us. So I'm in Florida now. I was in Tampa, actually in a very interesting community of Christians who are searching for their Hebrew roots. So I spoke there on Monday night, right after I got to the States, straight from the wedding of Tamar Folds. We spoke about that, I think, last week. I think we spoke about that. Whose dad was killed, whose father, Ari, was killed 6 months ago. And it was really an amazingly beautiful, joyous wedding, as it should be. And it was obviously sad as well, but the joy is really what stood out. Because we're not going to let the bad guys win. And therefore, there was an extra effort to make the young couple start off their married life in the way that they should. And it was really a very special thing to be there. And it was really like just the highlight of my week at the beginning of the week. But then I got on a plane and came to the States. And like I said, spoke in Tampa. And then I flew down to a little bit south. And last night I spoke in Boynton Beach at an Orthodox synagogue called Anshe Chesed. Met Rabbi Avi Billet and his beautiful congregation, and they came out to hear me talk about Israel and specifically about Judea and Samaria. And I had the unexpected pleasure of meeting his wife, Chana Billet, and we just hit it off. She drove me back to where I'm staying. And so she agreed to be interviewed today. Normally she does the interviewing because she has a background in English and she's a journalist. But what intrigued me as we were speaking last night, as a matter of fact, her youngest of 7 children is sitting on her lap as we do this interview, because she is homeschooling. And that is something that I hear from different people, both in Israel, both in the States, and something that's also intrigued me for a long time. So first of all, Chana, thank you so much for joining me in the middle of a crazy afternoon.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right. So, so tell me a little, first of all, tell my audience a little bit about yourself. You told me you were born in Milwaukee and now you get to live in the sunshine down here in Florida. But how did you get to, what you're doing today?
Sure. I love living in Florida. The weather is great. It's not Israel, but Israel's the best place to be, but I feel privileged to be married to a congregational rabbi. There's loads to do in the States, and that is what brought us to Florida. My husband's the rabbi of a shul in Boynton Beach, so that is what brought us to Florida. And in Florida, everything is pretty laid back. You don't have the keeping up with the Joneses atmosphere like you do up north on the East Coast. We lived in New York before we moved down to Florida, and you really have the opportunity to breathe and pause and assess life and kind of run with your intuition. So we had the opportunity to homeschool down here because it's not weird. There are plenty of homeschooling families and cohorts of people and communities down here of people who homeschool. So we were able to join these different groups and cooperatives to have a sense of community and support. And it's been great.
Okay, so a bunch of questions pop to mind. First of all, is it not against the law? I mean, how does it work? I know there's some people that homeschool in the States, in Israel, but how does it work in the States? Is it a federal thing or is it go state by state? How people are mandated to educate their kids?
Sure. So it's a state by state thing. There isn't a federal law. Mm-hmm. Every state is different. So the homeschooling laws in New York are applicable to homeschooling families in New York, and the homeschooling laws in Florida are applicable to the homeschooling families in Florida. And some states make it a little bit more complicated than others, but legally you can homeschool in all 50 states.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the next question is, why would you want to do that? Okay, is it the high cost of yeshiva education, and I've had people on my show before who've been talking about that, and one interview in particular where he said it's really not sustainable, the fact that you just have so many high costs, half the people are paying and also subsidizing the half that can't. But like in Israel, that's actually one of the advantages of living in Israel is you can give your kids a Jewish education. They can learn Bible studies funded by the government because it's a public school and you can choose your track. Giving kids Jewish education in America is extraordinarily expensive. And so was that one of the considerations? You have, like I do, 7 kids, although you flipped it. You've got the 4 boys and the 3 girls, and I've got the 4 girls and the 3 boys, but it's good. So there's a balance here. So is that part of the thing, or was it like a totally kind of pedagogic decision that you felt that you and your husband would be able to educate your children in a way that was more in line with your belief system rather than sending them to, the day school that other people send their kids to?
Sure. It definitely, finances was not the main reason why we decided to homeschool. If I felt that the best place for my children, or each child, if you're going to, decide each child's form of education on an individual and case-by-case basis, I would send my kids to day school. So finances were not top of the reasons why we wanted to homeschool. It was because it was an educational choice and a personal choice for our family on so many different reasons. If you want to talk about finances, though, I do think that in assessing, well, actually, let me backtrack for 1 second. So my oldest was in 2nd grade. She finished 2nd grade in a typical day school where we were living at the time. And the school was fine. She was a happy kid and well-adjusted and doing well, but it wasn't like she was receiving this amazing education. She was in school, the hours were long, and the education was frontal, and it was very not creative. And I remember, she's a bookworm, so I'd want, she'd be reading, engrossed in whatever novel she was reading in the morning, and I had to get her out of the house. It was like, we got to go, we got to get to school, we have to get there on time. And I thought to myself, one of my main goals for my emerging readers for my second grade daughter at the time was for her to become a really good reader. So it seemed so weird that I had to have her stop what she was doing. She was in flow so she could get to school. So that's
where it first occurred to you. I mean, you weren't homeschooled, right?
I was not homeschooled. But the first time I ever met a homeschooler, I was actually in college. I went to Stern, and the first class I took was a writing class. It was a memoir class. And we really got to know all the other young women in the seminar because we were reading our memoirs that we wrote throughout the semester. And there was one young woman there who was so poised and so sophisticated and so intellectual and so mature. I don't even remember her name, but she made this impression on me to this day. And she was from California, and she was homeschooled. And I remember thinking, wow, God willing, when I have children, I'd love for them to turn out like her. Now, I didn't think I was going to homeschool. I had no idea what it was to be a mom, but that was kind of always in the back of my head of this young woman I'd met who was so intellectual and sophisticated and mature and polite and poised. And she was homeschooled. It can't be that weird of a thing. So that was in the back of my head. And then going back to when my oldest was in 2nd grade at the time, she would be in flow reading, and I'd have to, pull her from her books to get her to school. So I wanted her to be able to be exposed to the arts, and it's a long day in day school. There wasn't time for her to be in day school and be exposed to the arts. And I wanted her to have a peer group that went beyond our Dalit Amos in our neighborhood. And there wasn't...
Translate? Not all my listeners understand Hebrew.
It went beyond, the small enclave of the Jewish community in which we were living. And there wasn't time for her to make peers outside of the Jewish community if she was in day school from 8 until 4 in 2nd grade. I also wanted her to be able to learn when you're young at that creative age from different places. So, for example, there were homeschooling science classes at our local science center. In the planetarium, they were teaching about astronomy, and in the seaquarium, they were teaching about ocean life. And I just felt that's a lot more hands-on and tactile for kids to be learning at this young age than to be in a classroom and to be exposed to frontal learning when your brain at that point in your development is just so creative. And then the last reason it was finances. That definitely was not top of the list, but the school in which my kids were enrolled in at that time was on a downward slope. They were going, they were in between principals, and the parent morale was low. So we would go to Shabbos meals and nobody had anything good to say about the school. It was kind of reinventing itself at that time, going through a transformation. So I felt that obviously private school costs money without a doubt, but I felt that the price tag that they were putting, that they were valuing the education wasn't there. Maybe it was a $6,000 product at that time versus a $16,000 product. I don't think that school or education should be free, because obviously you want a good product and good products aren't free, but I didn't feel that the value of the price point was there at that time. And then I think then probably one of the most important reasons we decided to homeschool, besides the other ones that I mentioned, was that I always knew that I wanted to have a close family, and kids and siblings become close through shared experiences. So whether they are, taking enrichment classes together, or going to certain summer camps together, or having out of the house experiences together, that is what's going to make a family close. If the siblings are away from each other for the majority of the day, and then they come home, and then they have homework, and then they close their, they shut the doors to their room, and they're not really interacting for a good portion of the day, how can they become close without a shared experience? It doesn't mean that your kids can't become close if they're in school, but it just seemed natural for me, for the goals for my family, that homeschooling was one step towards hopefully creating an environment in which my kids would have shared experiences, because a lot of the homeschool activities which we take our children to are multi-ages. So my 6-year-old is in nature class with my 8-year-old, and my 10-year-old is in ceramics with my 12-year-old. So they have these shared experiences throughout the day, which bring them closer. And then lastly, I just felt that, well, my husband and I, we both really wanted to be in charge of our children's education. And to us, that is priceless. You can't put a value on that, where we're the ones who get to choose the curriculums that we feel is tailored best for our kids, for each kid individually, and that we can take these formative years and have the opportunity to expose them to concepts of the world that we want them to be exposed to, that they may not be getting in school, or if they're getting in school, they may not be through the filter in which we want them to be exposed to those concepts, to be critical thinkers, to be creative, to love the arts. And of course, from a Jewish perspective, all the Jewish, how do you say hashkafa, like, I guess, philosophy, that we want them to get from us first and foremost, to really shape their minds at a young age. And then, off to school they go. My daughter my oldest one now is currently in 10th grade, and she started high school in 9th grade. And I feel like the formative years, to be with them and to be with them every step of the way of what they're learning daily, helps prepare them for whom we want them to be as they get to be older.
So she's now in regular high school, and she's with the program, literally. I mean, she's whatever they're learning, whatever they've been learning for the last 15 years, the math, the science, the English, she's handling that. She's right where they are.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so so many questions. So how does this work? Because one of the interesting things about education now is, like, when I was growing up, the information you got was the information from your teacher, or you went to like Encyclopedia Britannica or something, right? Or one, like, reference books. People actually at some point, and this is going to tell everyone exactly how old I am, went to the library and got out books.
Well, hold on here. Check out my purse for everybody who can't see my purse. My purse looks like an old library card.
Wow, you have an antique purse. That's just so very cool.
I love that library feel. And,
right. Yeah. So I used to love library. I would go because I was a total nerd and check out like 10 books and return them 2 weeks later and then do it again. But now information is literally at your fingertips with a computer, even with a phone. So if you want to know when World War I started, or what different shades of blue there are in the world, within like 30 seconds, you can have all that information. So my thinking is that education should be more about, like you said, critical thinking, learning how to learn. This information is there. It's not just gathering information. It's being curious about the world, which is something that I think actually the educational system today doesn't have. You're given certain things and you're not taught to be curious and to ask beyond that, because there's tests.
Take things at face value.
Yeah, and there's tests and you have to pass the tests. Right. And therefore the kids are really limited in terms of what they're doing. So this is like, what you're doing here is totally fascinating. But as a mother also of a lot of kids, you must be completely devoted to what's happening in your house. Because one of the things that, when I sent my kids off to school, like I had a few hours, someone else was educating them and someone else was dealing them. So on that level, this is a complete devotion for you, to like your career. It's your motherhood, your career, everything is all here together. How does that work? Like, that's probably not for everybody.
It's probably not for everybody. It's for sure not for everybody. And I actually never talk about homeschooling with people because it is so personal. So it's so weird for me right now to be having this interview, because
there's just a few thousand people listening. Don't worry about it.
It is such a personal thing. And I try not to talk about homeschooling with people because it's personal. So not really relevant to everybody, but just from a curiosity standpoint, I guess.
No, and also there's more and more people. And the first people, actually, I have to say, that I met that told me about homeschooling were Christians a few years ago. I think I was up in Pennsylvania or somewhere, and they were saying to me that a lot of them homeschooled. Now, they were going into homeschooling because they weren't happy with the public school system in the United States. Coming from their perspective as Bible believers, they were upset that, for example, evolution was being taught in the schools, and their philosophy, as you talk about hashkafa, meaning Jewish philosophy, so their philosophy was not being taught in the schools, and they also felt that this was so important to them that it was something that they wanted to give their kids on their own. So that was really the first time, aside from reading, Louisa May Alcott books about Little House on the Prairie, and how, you'd have these one classrooms with all the kids in the town learning together. I had really thought for a long time that it was something that very few people did. But now I'm seeing that it's not true at all. I think more people are homeschooling than ever before. Do you have numbers on that, or like some kind of sense of what's happening?
I don't, but I do remember going to a homeschooling meetup within the Jewish Orthodox community in Florida with my oldest. There were a few families, and then I went to a homeschooling meetup. It was like, I think maybe a Tu B'Shvat party or something, maybe 6 or 7 years later, and there were like 30 families. So it definitely is, it's definitely growing, and I guess it also depends where you're living in the country. Right. Some places lend itself to homeschooling more. The weather is great in Florida. The laws are pretty easy to figure out in terms of how to do it legally. And there are a lot of religious Christians down here, so they kind of pave the way to not make it weird, even though there are also plenty of secular people who homeschool as well. Mm-hmm.
So do you have different groups for the homeschooling? Like you said, you have this, homeschooling. Do you have, let's say, one group in the arts, and there you would be with Christians and secular people and Jews, and then you have a homeschooling group that's more focused, let's say, on Torah studies and on supporting yourself, your ideas together, more on the Jewish framework. And do you have a science one? How does that work?
There are different cooperatives and different Facebook groups. So I think as my family got bigger, I stopped doing those more because we're our own cooperative as it is. And everybody kind of homeschools for different reasons. One of the reasons for us, in addition to the other things that I mentioned, was that I really want my kids to be able to discover a passion and pursue it, which means that my daughter, who's a figure skater, has to be at the rink when her coach is available and when the ice time is available. Mm-hmm. So I can't really have a cooperative that I have to attend to at that time, or,
So your daily schedule is completely around the kids and the things that they're doing?
Yeah. Our daily schedule is completely around the kids and the things that they're doing.
I think which is one reason why when I was at your house last night at like 10 o'clock, the baby was up and the lights were all on, and your husband said to me, we don't really have like that bedtime thing in our house because we're homeschooling. And I was thinking to myself, I don't know what the connection is between bedtime and homeschooling, but I guess it means that the atmosphere in the house is a little more free, or a little more kind of rolling with it.
Definitely. They can be practicing their piano at 9:30 at night for sure. And they'll get up a little bit later. Uh-huh. Then, they don't have to be at school at 7:45 6:40 or whatever time in the morning.
Well, what happens, like, do you have a son who's over 13? Because one of the things in Jewish day school is prayer.
Right. Oh, yeah, no. They go to Minyan in the morning. So the boys go to bed earlier because they
go to prayer service with their dad.
Yeah. And my daughter, who was now in high school, she would also go to Minyan in the morning. We don't treat the boys any differently than the girls when it comes to going to Minyan in the morning, because the girls are not with the babies or making food like I would be. So we definitely think that at this time in their life, they should be going to services in the morning, just like the boys are.
So I guess you really can see if one of your kids has a tendency, to excel in something, or like you said, a passion for reading or for science. Where do you get the curriculum to be able to teach them?
Sure. So each stage is different, and there's so many curriculums for everything out there. I mean, just for people who are interested, you should check out Khan Academy. That's online and free.
How do you spell that?
Oh, Khan Academy, Khan Academy. They offer so many things on there. But for my middle schoolers, as much as I want to sit and read Shakespeare with them and learn about the Revolutionary War and all that great liberal arts stuff, I don't have time because I'm dealing with my younger kids who are my emerging readers, and I need to work on basic phonics with them. So the trend for our family has been that once they hit middle school, I like to sign them up for these online courses that come out of a private program in California called Online G3. And my kids, we pay per class, but I let them pick about 4 classes per semester that they want to take. And I don't care which ones they are, as long as they're meeting the different disciplines. So for example, my daughter, she had to take a literature class. I didn't care if it was Shakespeare or if it was American Lit. I let her follow her interests. So it happened to be that year she took 2 Shakespeare classes that semester because she was really into Shakespeare at the time, and that was fine with me. So they have their outline in terms of how many histories I want them to take, how many literatures, how many social sciences, and then
that's what's dictated by the state. They give you like certain courses that the kids have to take, or no?
No, Florida's different. But I kind of have an idea of what I want them to know. And so they can pick within the rubric that I give them of how many, courses they should be taking. They can pick the actual topics or subjects that they want.
And where do you get the Hebrew or the Jewish curriculum for them as well?
Jewish stuff we do at home. And
it helps to have a husband who's a rabbi?
It definitely does. But there's so much out there, And I think that for people who don't have the background of having gone to day school or having been born religious, you can still homeschool the Judaic studies. There's so much out there that you can learn and do it with your children at the same time. It could be a great bonding experience. You could hire somebody to teach, as like a private tutor, a yeshiva student or a rabbi or a rebbitzin. So there's lots of creative solutions for people who may want to explore homeschooling and still not sacrifice the Judaic studies.
So how does it work in terms of their social life? Because there'll be people who will say, well, that sounds great in terms of the educational level, but how do they know how to get along with their peers? How do they know, what to do in a classroom situation where you have to wait for someone else to answer the question and you're not just the only one there? All of that, which is also a part of growing up to be a social kind of person.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure. I mean, I think that if the parents are in tune to social skills in the same way that you would hope a teacher is in tune to social skills. So whoever the caregiver is for the child at that moment, they should be reinforcing positive social skills with the kids. I mean, I see kids who are in school and I see homeschoolers who are socially awkward. So I don't think it's a reflection of, if you're in school, you're automatically going to be socially adept and with it. And I don't think it means that, if you're a homeschooler, that means you're automatically going to be socially awkward. It's more of who's reinforcing the positive behaviors, and do you have that person in your life at that time?
So where do they make friends from? The synagogue? Like, where's their they go to youth groups? Where's their camps? Where's their reservoir of kids the same age, not like their siblings who are a few years older, a few years younger, in order to have those friendships?
So definitely the neighborhood kids is a big influence in my kids' life. They're friends with the neighbors and the kids who go to our synagogue. And then in the we've done a lot of different homeschooling classes, and so they have become the kids' friends as well in the different cooperatives that they've gone to or classes that they're signed up for. They see the same kids every week and are able to build that relationship. One challenge is, I mean, it's not all roses, obviously, like nothing in life is, but schooled kids or kids who are in school, they're used to having shared experiences with the other kids who are in school. So it's harder for kids at a certain age to kind of make room in their life for kids who aren't having a shared experience with them. So that was a challenge that I tried to anticipate when I pulled my kids out of school so many years ago, was that I went out of my way to make sure that my son was going to Boy Scouts with kids in the neighborhood just so that he could still have a shared experience with kids in the neighborhood. And I started a book club on Sunday mornings for my daughter and her friends who were in school. So this way she could still have a shared experience with kids in the neighborhood. Because I just, I anticipated it's going to get awkward down the road when, you're 9 or 10 and the kids are all talking about what's going on in school and you don't have that shared experience with them anymore. So trying to be creative in terms of how to come up with other shared experiences that my kids could have with kids in the neighborhood.
And do you share some of these classes with other mothers? For example, if you know other moms who are homeschooling, let's say 3 or 4 of you, and one of them is great at, I don't know, piano, and all of you have kids who want piano, so she'll take the kids and teach them all piano, and you'll take them at one point and teach them literature or something that you have expertise in? Or everybody really just homeschools their own kids for the most part, unless they're going to a museum or something like that?
So there are definitely people who do what you just mentioned. I don't, because I have so many different kids and their schedules to throw into the puzzle. I don't have time to kind of give back to other families in order for them. I'd rather just pay a world-class instructor or a great instructor in something instead of having it be kind of like a bartering system.
Right.
Although people do that for sure. And there definitely are cooperatives out there that I have taken advantage of in the past. I don't anymore, but people do, in terms of coming up with like parent-led things. But there's so many homeschooling opportunities in terms of activities and programs. I found that the ones that you actually have to pay for just end up having a higher quality than the volunteer-led stuff, because they are actually
well, you're getting the expert.
Right. Exactly. Right.
So is it usually moms who do the homeschooling? Like the dad, it's a little more traditional?
Dads are out there too, for sure. Because a family that's homeschooling, they're already kind of not traditional to begin with, want to even explore that route. So definitely I've seen families where the mom's the breadwinner and the dad's home, or the dad works from home and the mom may have an office job, or they split it 50-50, but definitely at the homeschool meetups and events, the dads are definitely there.
So whatever works, like total flexibility, whatever works for each family. I'm just thinking of a friend of mine who lives in the Jordan Valley in Israel. They actually live on a ranch. And she told me, I think when he was 12, she pulled her son out of school, and they study with him in the morning. They do math and science and all of that in the morning. And then in the afternoon, he works with his father on the ranch, and he's out there on the tractor, and he knows how to weld, and he knows how to plant, and he knows how to prune. And he is spending incredible quality time with his father and learning very, very practical skills as well. So, that's a different environment, obviously, when you're living in.
That's really, the school of hard knocks and real world experiences. It's not so much what do you want to be when you grow up, but what do you want to be now? Yeah. My kids are all great cooks. Each one is an amazing cook. And I happen to love cooking, so they've seen me cook, but I have not taught them to cook. They will go onto YouTube and they'll Google things. And my son just made sourdough bread the other day. I've never made sourdough bread in my life. He wanted to learn how to make sourdough bread, so he Googled it and he made a starter, and it was pretty cool to see him, learn a new skill on his own. And they do that for so many things. Now we live in the information age with the computer and YouTube, and kids can really learn all sorts of skills on their own if, with guidance, but they have the opportunity to learn so much more at home now, or not in school, because all these resources are online.
Wow. So, is there any sense of, like you're a very talented woman, and you were telling me you also run the book club, and you're, in addition to doing all this, being married to a rabbi is no small thing. The terminology is usually the Rebbitzin, and it's not just being married to the rabbi. Very often, a lot of the responsibilities of the community are on the couple. So he may be the one in the Orthodox setting that's leading the services and is more the, the figurehead or the pillar of the community in that way. But you certainly, I'm sure, have a lot of things that are expected of you from the synagogue as well.
It's such a great congregation. I don't feel any expectations in terms of pressure or anything like that. They're just wonderful. It's really a wonderful fit. So I have the creativity or the space to be creative for any involvement that I want to have in the community. I currently run a book club, which is an author interview series where once a month in season we meet, and I'll do a 30-minute power discussion of the book that we read for that month. And then we get the author on the line on Skype for another 30 minutes. So it's a 60-minute book club. And the last 30 minutes, we have the author there, and we are able to ask the author all the questions that we have of the book and really bring literature to life. So that's a really fun program that I do at the shul. And
is it ever frustrating? Look, I mean, I really also I was always busy when my kids were growing up. They were definitely my priority. I was always involved with different things, but I didn't have a full-blown career out of the house. Definitely not like what I'm doing now with the speaking. Then I run around and the tour guiding, and I run around, but nobody's home, so it's fine. So to some degree, parents who are homeschooling, although you said that there can be a balance, but like in your case, you're just kind of, putting the kids first in big time right now. And then when they're a little bigger, then you can go and maybe follow some, career path of your own.
Yeah, I guess.
Right. You could probably run a school at this point.
Very different than homeschooling, but because school is less about the individual and more about the collective whole, and homeschooling is the opposite. But yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like, I guess my personal career aspirations are on hold, and that's fine. And we'll get to those in due time.
Mm-hmm. So this has been, I find this like really, really fascinating. And I don't know if this is going to be like the new trend or if it should be. First of all, not every parent should be a parent, but leaving that aside for now, not every parent is cut out to homeschool. I don't know if I would have had the patience. And there were definitely things that my husband and I supplemented, passions that we had that we gave over to the kids. But I give you a lot of credit, because I don't think that I would have been able to do this.
Oh, thanks. Well, I don't know that it's going to be the new trend, because I think it's really in a case-by-case basis and an individual basis. I don't think it's the best thing for everybody at all. I mean,
what, like in your family, let's say kid number, 4, you somehow, for whatever reason, feel should be in a traditional classroom setting, for whatever reason. Is it all or nothing, or do you take it on a case-by-case basis with each one of your individual kids?
We take it on a case-by-case basis for each one of our individual kids. No, for sure. Yeah, if I felt like school would be the best place for my kid at that time, we'd put our kid in school. Yes, we definitely take it like on a case-by-case basis. Mm-hmm. It's hard to get our educational goals it's hard to have our educational goals that we want for our kids to be met in school, right. To be honest, though, at this young age. I just don't see that happening. But if we felt that they could, get those, or if life changed and, I had to go to work for for a reason, and my kids had to be in school, absolutely, we would send them to school.
And is there anything that you've felt, you said you would hire an expert, like, let's say trigonometry. One of them is like really great at math. I'm talking about myself. Like, right. When it came to calculus, it just wasn't happening. I did really well in math up until that point, but calculus just wasn't happening, or physics. So in that case, that's when you bring in an outside expert?
Oh, for sure. Again, this is a personal choice. Mm-hmm. I'm all about like hiring people to do the best job. Okay. So like my son, for example, I want to make sure that he's going to be able to get into the right math level for high school. So I hired somebody to to be a math tutor for him. I would love to sit and do, algebra 1 with him right now. But again, I have my younger kids, and I just felt it was more efficient. It was a more efficient use of my time to focus on my younger kids and to hire a math tutor with him, so that he would be able to get through the curriculum faster.
Right. So there are some communities that I know it's so much about not just sending your kids to school, but which school. Like I've heard of people who, when their kids are born, they already have to put them into that certain specific nursery that anybody has to have their kids go to. And it only gets worse from there. And then if you don't get accepted to the certain prep school, forget about any high school. And then college, I mean, Harvard's never going to take you. And therefore, by the time you're 3 years old, you are doomed. So do you think that could be a possibility? Does that happen with homeschooled kids, that some of the Ivy Leagues might say, this, or that, like, do they take the SATs? Do they take these standardized tests when they get to a certain age?
There are definitely homeschoolers who get into good colleges and things like that. So for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Although the world is such an interesting place now, at least like in Israel, which is, of course, where I hope your children end up. Right. No secret there. A lot of it isn't about the school that you went to. And there's a lot of people who don't even go to university at all because, A, they come out of the army, especially if they were in intelligence units, knowing more than most of us will ever know about anything. And with all the high tech and a lot of that kind of, scene that's happening now where if you can think out of the box, that's what's going to get you ahead. So there's a whole new dynamic happening here that's really moving away from that traditional kind of classroom and getting a degree and having to have the diploma on your wall. Otherwise, you can forget about any job interview. So it could be that you're fitting in exactly here with what's happening around.
Yeah, I definitely believe that you shouldn't let school get in the way of your education, because those are two different things. And I do remember, I don't know if it was Apple or I think it was Apple or Google. They had this grant that they were offering. People had to apply to be part of this program, of this prestigious grant. You had to be under 26 and you couldn't have gone to college because they wanted your brain to be fresh and unshaped in terms of how to think. Not that I'm definitely a proponent for college, and I hope all my kids will go to college, but it's just a different perspective on education.
Right. So the Jewish education because it's been paramount. I mean, we're told to teach your kids Torah, which means reading literally between the lines, teach your kids how to read, teach your kids how to learn. And there's a very old tradition in Judaism of learning in pairs. If you go into a yeshiva, like a place of Torah learning, you will see usually two people it looks like they're arguing vociferously and waving their arms, and they're going over part of the Torah or some of the oral law and arguing the different points. Do you think that that's something that, is in our tradition already, to have that kind of, not necessarily formal education is already something that's kind of built into Judaism?
Definitely. We were talking before this interview about the concept of the base medrash, which I think is so beautiful.
The study hall.
The study hall. And the idea of having a chavrusa, of having a Torah partner. Person isn't supposed to sit and learn Torah on their own. You're supposed to be in a communal setting with other creative minds at work at the same time, so you can bounce ideas off of them and you can have this collaborative learning process, and get inspiration from other people. We're not supposed to be hermits, isolated. And I think that maybe the Christian approach to homeschooling is that you want to pull away from the world and you want to isolate yourself. But my perspective is the opposite. I want to become more part of the world, and not to pull away, but to help me engage in the world, to help my kids engage in the world. And in terms of the idea of having a study hall and a chavrusa, so that is hard, because if you're pulling your kids out of, a typical day school, right? They don't have that base medrash environment. I wish there were, but something that, we could, kind of have instead. But I definitely, one of the, I'd always encourage my kids to go to the classes that our synagogue offers, a lot of the adult education classes. My kids will come along anyway and hear those speakers and stuff, because I do want them to learn from all different people and have that kind of creative, collaborative learning experience.
So, I mean, one more question, and then, you've got a gazillion things to do. How does it work in terms of discipline in the house? Like, do you have to set, aside from the fact that at 10 o'clock at night, everyone was awake, do they have a schedule? Or is it kind of, this is what you need to do today, I don't care when you do it, just get it done? Or is there some kind of personal responsibility here also? Or you really, at some point, because they still are kids, have to say, this is what you got to do by a certain time or by the end of the week? Or how does that work?
So the different for the younger kids versus the middle-aged kids versus the older kids. So by the time the kids are in middle school, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and they have their own online classes and they're learning on their own, they have a complete handle and understanding of when their classes are live that they have to attend, their webinars, because they participate in the lectures online, and they have a complete understanding of what their assignments are and when they have to get them done. So I never have to prod my middle schoolers. Like, you have to
really go upstairs and do your homework right now?
I don't even know what their deadlines are. They are motivated in their classes and they do it on their own. Wow. Now, my younger ones, they haven't gotten there yet. So definitely, they have their benchmarks that we try to meet every day. And sometimes we meet them and sometimes we don't. And that's why tomorrow is a wonderful day. There's always tomorrow. We'll try to meet our benchmarks tomorrow, because it is a work in progress to get kids to understand what, they're to learn not to push things off. And we try to take a step back and look at things globally and not get so caught up on, you didn't do your math now, versus we'll try again tomorrow. And that working on the skill of learning how to meet those benchmarks is more important than the actual task at hand.
So do you have summer vacation? Because we've got this school year, right? And there's certain holidays and there's certain times off and there's winter vacation, etc. So do you go all year round, or you still they go to camp, or they do something different in the summer?
So my kids, if they want to go to camp, they can go to camp. My kids have gone to sleepaway camp at different times and day camp and stuff. Or we'll go visit relatives at different different, where my parents and my in-laws. So if they have something else going on in the summer, that obviously is priority, and they're going to camp or going on a family trip or whatever it is. But on days when they don't have camp, if they're not going to camp or we're not on a trip, school continues. So wow. It's kind of like
so it's really a way of life.
It's a way of life. It's a way of life.
Okay. Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you, Chana Billet. I mean, I learned a lot today. I hope that my listeners did as well. And I'm sure that some of my listeners will have feedback. And if you guys, anybody out there is homeschooling and you've got suggestions, or you want to write to me, eve@thelandofisrael.com, and maybe share some of your experiences, I'm also happy to pass them on to Chana for you, because I think this is very, very interesting. I think we all realize that education needs to somehow be changed. Jewish education, Christian education, science, all of it. There's something not good that's happening. And maybe for some people, this is a direction that can be taken. I imagine that it's harder in single family homes, but right. not impossible, but definitely harder.
Right. No, you have to have support, whether it's a spouse or a parent, or if you hire a babysitter to help you out. Mm-hmm. Because you can't do everything. So, the carpools, the nice thing about school is that you drop your kids off at one place and you pick them up, hours later. If you're homeschooling and you want your kids to have different opportunities, it's a lot of driving. Mm-hmm. All the different classes my kids take, we put a lot of mileage on in our car. So it's always nice to have somebody to help do the drive, or to have a career where you can work remotely while your kids are in their class. Right. I always try to be efficient as much as possible. So if I'm dropping my kids off at a class, I have my double jogger. I'll take the little ones out so I can get a jog in, or I'll do my grocery shopping during their class, or,
no downtime.
No downtime. You're always trying to double up and be as efficient as possible to make it worthwhile all around.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And the baby's been great. Oh. I think we barely heard a peep out of him. What a sweetie. Okay. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. And I want to thank Tabitha and Ben. And as I said, pre-taping this before you're hearing it, a couple of days in Florida. Actually, when you hear it, if you're listening to this on Sunday, I will be in Phoenix. So, but I'm in a different stage of life than Chana is now. So That's why I'm moving all over the place. Anyhow, it's been a great trip, and I hope it continues to be, and I'll fill you guys all in when I get back to Israel. So take care, everybody, and have a great week and a great second Adar, the happy month. We get 2 of them this year. Isn't that amazing? All right, so Rejuvenation on the land of Israel. This is Eve Harrow. Take care, everybody. Goodbye for now.
Hi, this is Josh Haston, host of Israel Uncensored here on the Land of Israel Network. Tune in every Monday to hear the latest news coming from Israel, plus interviews with top Israeli politicians, media personalities, and activists, all doing their part to counter anti-Israel propaganda and BDS. Don't miss a minute. Be sure to stream or download all of the amazing programming from our wide range of hosts here